capable of paying. And so we have this now, a situation in which the federal government, on July 1st, the first day of the budget, practically has no money. And it relies on borrowing, and we go on each year. So yes, I would reinforce what you've said and ask myself first and the rest of my colleagues in political parties to begin to imagine an efficient, poor-centric 21st century developed Pakistan. Thank you very much. Pakistan Pandava.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Sorry, Shahbaz, I have to take this moment to answer the question that Shahbaz asked, which is on the IMF. Because I think Shahbaz also knows that I have anchored 1316 program, which is one of the only few programs, long-term program that Pakistan has completed. The current program must be completed because that shows a commitment of a country to see through whatever reform program that is going on. The current macro stability that you see in the country, the buffers on the energy side or the buffers on the fiscal side, the buffers on the monetary side, ये महवर हैं क्योंकि इस program का. But I must say that the current shape and form of the program in terms of the taxation that it has unleashed on the manufacturing and the personal income tax side needs a rethink in this budget. And that through the expenditure reforms, and that should take us to the end of the program in October 27. Thank you.
Thank you, Haqqan Najib. Thank you, Adil Saab, Khurram Nasir Saab, for wonderful concluding remarks. Ali Salman Saab, we always learn something from you about the private sector. Afia Malik Saab and my friend Sajid Amin Saab. My concluding words before we go for lunch is that, yes, Pakistan needs fiscal stability because we cannot afford to lose what we have earned, and mostly earned by poor, by sacrifices given by poor, lower middle income group and the middle income groups. Fiscal stability is important. What we need to bring in the whole discussion is the political wisdom in decision making. So everything should not be left on bureaucrats and technocrats. There should be a political wisdom. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before going towards the food energy, we have I'm just wanted to announce that we have next panel on political economy of relief versus macroeconomic stabilization, in which we have great panelists, Dr. Abid Suleri, Ms. Asma Shirazi, Mr. Khurram Hussain, and Mr. Harun Sharif. And Mr. Fahad Hussain will be moderating that session. And also we will be joined by Mr. Bilal Kayani, State Minister of Finance, after the lunch break. So please stay with us. And the lunch is served in Kehkashan 2. Please join us over there. Dear audience, please settle down. We are about to start the next session. Our next session will be starting in 2 minutes. Is it on the political economy of relief versus macroeconomic stabilization? And this session will be moderated by Mr. Fahad Hussain, Executive Director, Express 24/7. And for this session, I would like to request the panelists to join us on the stage. Dr. Abid Sulehri, Executive Director of STPI and Board of Governors of NDRMF. Sir, please join us on the stage. Ms. Asma Shirazi, Senior Journalist from News, please join us on the stage. Mr. Khurram Hussain, Senior Business and Economy Journalist. Sir, please join us on the stage. And Mr. Haroon Sharif, former Minister of State and Chairman, Board of Investment. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for joining us. And okay, and shortly we will be joined by Syed Naveed Kaur. Now I'll hand over the session to Fahad Hussain.
I'm even. Hello. Hello. Could you set it? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and welcome. I'm Fahad Hussain, and this is the second panel of our joint conference between Express 247 and STPI. And in this session, we are basically going to pick up from where the last session left off. Some of the themes that were discussed in the first session, we'll try and bring them into our discussion. And because I have a very mixed panel of guests, both from the media and also from non-media sectors, as they say. So I'm going to take advantage of that and try and get an overall view of how policy making can be more effective, why it has failed, especially when it comes to the energy sector, and what lessons can we learn from this major energy shock that Pakistan and the rest of the world is also experiencing. So to discuss this issue with me, let me just quickly introduce the guest from the left side. Mr. Haroon Sharif is former chairman of the Board of Investment, has also had a very long stint working for various international organizations and international policy making. So he brings with him a wealth of experience in terms of not only how the private sector works, but how the public sector works or doesn't work, either way. Dr. Abid Sulehri, of course, Executive Director of SDPI and one of the most well-known economists of Pakistan, and also our partner in this conference. So welcome. Asma Shirazi, one of my closest friends, colleagues, most well-known journalist of Pakistan, does probably one of the best shows in Pakistan on Hum Television. Wonderful to have you. And Mr. Khurram Hussain, who I've known for a fairly long time. I won't say how long, but I've known him for a fairly long time. Probably one of the most accomplished, well-known business and economy journalists and commentators, writes his very influential column in Dawn, and has some very interesting and biting observations on the energy sector. So welcome. In fact, why don't I start with you, Khurram? So the main, we're talking about why we are at a state where after so many decades of struggling with power and energy, we were still not ready for the shock that came. So is it basically because we've never had policy consistency? Every government has come and tried to reinvent the energy wheel, or is it something inherent to the weakness of our economy?
A bit of both. Let me start with the first part of your question. One thing that plagues the energy sector is actually too much policy consistency. And I know that sounds counterintuitive and against what we normally hear, but if you let me explain, the way when Pakistan came into being, it had practically no power generation capacity. If you even look at the map of the grid that we had, there was one major line that went from Peshawar out to Rawalpindi as a grid line, and the rest of the country just had little microgrids that fed themselves and each other. There was hardly any power generation capacity there. All of it was built post-independence. And all of it was built in the public sector, like it used to be in those days. That was normal in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. By the 1980s, it became unfeasible, increasingly, for governments, including Pakistan, to pay for the kind of costs of building infrastructure. So they began to search for a new model to finance infrastructure development, and in came what we now call the IPP policy. And Pakistan was the first to adopt the IPP policy, and afterwards, many other countries adopted it too, which brought in a mix of private and public sector.
This was the 1990s.
This was in the 1990s. It began in 86. The first private power project came around in the early 90s. 94 is when the policy came. So Hub Power Company, for example, came before the policy did and served as a demonstration project. It can be done. Now the whole idea, but I mean, as soon as the power policy came, it was attacked as being for corruption and for all kinds of things. But today, that same IPP policy hangs like an albatross around our necks. We can't get out of it. Although it has long outlived its utility, we should have grown out of it in the 2000s. And yet in 2026, we are still carrying on with it. And now we are in the midst of a new transformation that is coming, which is solar and renewable. And rather than look at the transformation and look for a path forward in that and think innovatively and say, okay, how do we change and adapt to take advantage of this revolution that is coming our way? We are trying to rescue the private power policy, the old world. We're trying to rescue that. So when the original infrastructure that was built in the public sector was rendered outmoded and the IPP policy came, it was attacked for politically, it came under politically motivated attack, alleging corruption and whatnot. And people felt, or at least the argument was made, that the old way of doing things was better and it should have continued that way. Now that the IPP policy has become the norm and it is being superseded, the change that is coming in is being vilified as something bad and something to be guarded against because it's disrupting the grid, because it's disrupting the business as usual in this country. There is, now within this framework, there are a lot of other policy stories to tell, like, this government, how it affected power tariffs and that government. But overall, if a country's thrust is to cling to whatever it has managed to build and try and resist any kind of change in order to safeguard what it has built against that change, then that country is going to land up where Pakistan stands today, which is with an unviable investment in energy that it can neither operate nor shut down.
So basically, we are not learning lessons. And, as you mentioned, you said there's perhaps in some cases, there's too much of continuity and IPPs is one issue. But the other is the solar issue. I'll just come to the present one because that links to what you were saying. और हम कभी solar पे कुछ सुनते हैं, कभी कुछ सुनते हैं. It's strange. A couple of years back, we were told that we must asma बस solar ही और कुछ भी नहीं. Let's just do solar. And government is going to convert all official buildings to solar, and that is the only way to go. And then suddenly, after a couple of years, we are told, no, actually that's not. Because the bureaucracy says, okay, well, if everybody leaves the solar grid, then everybody leaves the main grid. So then who will pay for that? तो ये जो एक अजीब तमाशा खड़ा हुआ है कि you can't decide what to do. Why is that?
थैंक यू सो मच फाद साहब, इतने जबरदस्त पैनल में आपने मुझे इनवाइट किया है, एंड वंडरफुल इशू एक्चुअली व्हिच वी हैव टू डिस्कस एंड वी शुड डिस्कस अगेन एंड अगेन। एक्चुअली जो आपने सवाल पूछा है ये इनकंसिस्टेंसी ऑफ द पॉलिसीज है। एक गवर्नमेंट आती है, उसके बाद वो उसकी पॉलिसीज बदल जाती हैं, फिर दूसरी गवर्नमेंट आती है, फिर वो उसकी पॉलिसीज बदल जाती हैं, और चूंकि हमारे यहाँ पॉलिटिकल इनकंसिस्टेंसी भी रही है, एक तरह से डिस्टेबलाइज्ड गवर्नमेंट्स रही है, सो कोई भी पॉलिसी जो है वो अपना दवाम उसको नहीं मिल सका। और यही वजह है कि आज जब हम सोलर के अंदर इतनी बिजली पैदा कर रहे हैं कि हम एग्जैक्टली उसको एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, तो वी आर आस्किंग दिस क्वेश्चन कि हम एनर्जी क्राइसिस का शिकार क्यों हैं। और उसकी वजह यह है कि वो जो जिन प्रोजेक्ट्स की बात अभी खुरम साहब कर रहे थे, और वो प्रोजेक्ट्स जो थे वो जो लगाए गए, उसके बाद फिर एक एलीट कैप्चर जो है इसके अंदर भी इमर्ज हुआ, जिस तरह से मुख्तलिफ चीजों के ऊपर इमर्ज होता चला गया, और उस एलीट कैप्चर ने इस एनर्जी को अपने कंट्रोल में ले लिया। और उसके बाद फिर आपने देखा कि किस तरह से आईपीपीज को, यानी आप उनकी बिजली इस्तेमाल करें या ना करें, आपको उनको पैसे देना पड़ते हैं। और वो क्यों देना पड़ते हैं? क्योंकि वो सब के सब ऐसी अशराफिया से उनका ताल्लुक है जो कि गवर्नमेंट के अंदर बैठी हुई है, डिसीजन मेकर्स में से है, और वो आपको मजबूर करती है कि आप ऐसे फैसले करें। तो मेरा ख्याल है कि ये एक जो पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी हमारी है, इसमें जो एलीट कैप्चर है, भले वो चीनी के मामले के ऊपर हो, भले वो इसके मामले के ऊपर हो, एक ऐसा मुल्क जिसके अंदर आप देखें कि बायोगैस के लिए लातादाद आपके पास अपॉर्चुनिटीज मौजूद है, एक ऐसा मुल्क जिसके अंदर सोलर की, यानी सूरज ने तो कहीं नहीं जाना, और सूरज आपके पास मौजूद है, आपको दे रहा है, लेकिन आपका जो सारिफ है, आप आते हैं और आप कहते हैं कि एक को आपने आप पहले सोलर के ऊपर लगाते हैं पैसे और आप लोगों को इंसेंटिवाइज करते हैं, और उसके बाद जब लोग उसके ऊपर आ जाते हैं तो आप कहते हैं कि इसके ऊपर हमें टैक्स लगा देना है। फिर आपका एलीट कैप्चर जो कि टैक्स के ऊपर बैठा हुआ है, जो कि चंद लाख लोग हैं जो कि इस मुल्क के अंदर टैक्स देते हैं, और मुझे और आपको और तमाम जो आम आदमी है उसको इसका खमियाजा भुगतना पड़ता है। तो आई थिंक ये जो इनकंसिस्टेंसी और जो लोगों के, अवाम के रिलीफ से मुतालिक पॉलिसीज हैं, उनके ऊपर वो नहीं बैठते, जिसकी वजह से ये सारा मामला आता है। अभी अगर आप इक्तिसादी सर्वे पढ़े कि 5,000 कितनी सब्सिडीज दी गई हैं, कितना अशराफिया इस मुल्क के अंदर, तो आपकी आंखें खुल जाएंगी। लेकिन उसी वक्त में सोलर के ऊपर जो है वो आप, या आपके पास हवा मौजूद है, आप विंड की वो फैसिलिटी ले सकते हैं, आपके पास सूरज मौजूद है, आपके पास गोबर मौजूद है, अगर आप एनर्जी के ऊपर जाएं, मगर आपके पास पॉलिसीज मौजूद नहीं है, आपके पास कंसिस्टेंसीज मौजूद नहीं है, आपके पास वो रवैया, वो बिहेवियर मौजूद नहीं है जिसमें आपने अवाम को रिलीफ देना है, बल्कि वो आवाम को तकलीफ देने के मुतरादिफ हो जाता है। तो ये रिलीफ देने की बजाय जो तकलीफ देने की पॉलिसी है हमारी हुकूमतों की, मेरा ख्याल है इसको बदलने की जरूरत है।
Dr. Abbas, very brief. This is the main issue. And even if you look at, for example, where we are today with this oil shock, so we haven't learned lessons, as both Khurram and Asma said. What guarantees do we have that we are going to learn any lessons from this energy shock that we are getting now? It is only now that we are talking about strategic reserves and all the other things that we heard in the first session, and also about whether we should have two energy ministries or one energy ministry, whether we should have technocrats or generalists or bureaucrats. I mean, these are the discussions that we've been having for the last 50, 60 years. But we have to wait for a major shock to then suddenly realize what we have been doing. So is there anything which convinces you that we are actually going to learn the lessons that we need to learn and make the changes that we need to make in terms of our energy sector?
Fahad, unfortunately, in this struggle between choosing urgent and important, we always, like all of the human beings, the governments, they also tend to go for urgent, and urgent only becomes urgent when it comes as a shock. This energy shock, as we discussed in the previous panel as well, it's just unfolding. It's not at its peak yet. Rather, for the guest sitting here, in today's Financial Times, Martin Wolf has written an excellent column today. And he's talking about this energy shock, and his conclusion is that the worst is about to come in a month's time. Because the inventories, they are draining up. So it's not only a price shock, it's not only a supply shock. When we talk of crude, we are actually ignoring many of the byproducts of this crude, which include jet fuel, which include fertilizer, which include gas. And in the context of Pakistan, it's not only solar energy where we remained inconsistent. What was CNG? So people of your and my age, all of us, we were convinced to get CNG installed in our cars only to find out that there is no gas in the country. Rather, I know very clearly that when we had this trade policy, which actually announced zero tariff on CNG buses, exactly in that year, we started this gas load shedding. So this policy consistency is very much there, but the ray of hope is that this Gulf shock, it would change our energy systems. So those would not remain the same. As after September 11, the air travel has completely changed. Similarly, with this Gulf war, the dependence on fossil fuel, that would have to change, because no country, whether it can pay or not pay. Today, we are not distincting who can pay and who cannot pay. It's all about the geography, and it's all about the supply passages. So that sort of change is very rapidly unfolding, and I hope that we will also learn from it. If we don't learn from it, we'll remain far behind in this whole struggle of energy, which is not only energy, it's economy, it's food security, it's basically your social security. Only yesterday in Kenya, 4 people, they died, and 25, they got seriously injured due to fuel price hike. The protesters, they are asking for reduction in fuel price by 45 shilling. Government offered 15 shilling. And then there was the social unrest, and 4 people, they lost their life. So this sort of social unrest is boiling up, and my only worry is that things, they would get worse if we don't come up with some consistent solutions.
Harun sir, this consistency of solution, you come with this unique background where you spent your career working at the highest level, both in the private and public sector, and you've obviously been very aware of the vulnerability that Pakistan had. It was no secret. I mean, the only people who didn't know about it probably were the governments. Everybody else knew that we were vulnerable. Now, knowing that you have a problem and still not solving it, is it the issue of political will not being there, or political skill not being? What is the issue?
But the reflection time for all of them. Before I come into this particular question of fiscal and government, I think we need to remember 2 things. First of all, policy inconsistency is one thing, but having a competitive good policy is another. As Puram has said, that you can be consistent for a bad policy.
Yeah.
And we are pretty good at it. So the question is, what is a good policy? A policy, first of all, it's credible. A policy that inspires the confidence of markets, that we want to invest in. A policy which is people-centered, not necessarily helping the people. That's one. Second is the governance of it, because we can blame the regular changes in political dynamics. We have not been able to build the institutions. The institutions ensure the governance of policy. And when institutions start favoring a few and excluding more, then the trust on institutions.
I just wanted to put that in context. It's not overall economic policy has been fixed. First of all, our economic model has been based on geopolitical. That is not necessarily economic value proposition. We have tried to find solution because of our geopolitical positioning, rather than offering a value that's where we can contribute to the world economy. And energy is no exception to that. Second, so second part is the old school mentality of bailouts. And since I have seen it from both sides, we are very happy if we buy 6 more months of our life. So there's a planning failure. When you have higher risks, post-COVID, the globally and Ukraine war should have allowed us that risks are rising, and we need to have institutions that can mitigate our risk without blaming anything. The institutions favored most political populism rather than getting into proper risk mitigation strategy, which is one is diversification. And that comes to our question of, the oil sector. So Pakistan's vulnerability became so evident that 85% of your oil-based products are imported. You are already vulnerable because your exports are not matching up. So your fiscal pressures now dictate the policy reaction, rather than a people-centric policy that how to, move forward and protect our industry, because somebody for a subsidized rate, somebody is paying the cost. It could be people, it could be industry, it could be next generations, what we are seeing in case of Pakistan. So I will close that it's a question of, I'm a student of institutional economics. It's a question of the overall institution of our political parties that runs on populism rather than evidence and, institutional strengthening. It is, and that has led to weakening of our technocratic institutions, where people have absolute sense. I have been, dealing from both sides. When I was in the international organization, we would bring PhD economists, petroleum sector experts, and others to talk. But the counterpart basically is just not, ready for that kind of conversation, because they really don't know what's happening in the global economy, what is the economic argument. So we have not invested. So it's both the weakness of the political institution, I would not say will. Second, it is the competence of institutions to deliver something. Now, do we have hope in that system? Unless we create space for a structure which challenges that system, and that space is respected, meaning on meritocracy and bringing in people who have done it in other countries. I see little hope of a change. We will remain reactive, will remain a bailout mentality, unfortunately, and wait for the shock waves. That's it. So that's my overall, take on that it's an institutional question that even if we want to do it, we have the wherewithal to do it. And, obviously crony capitalism and other impacts, they are cross-cutting things.
Thank you. Let me welcome Sayyid Naveed Qamar, member of the National Assembly. He's also the chairman of the Standing Committee on Finance and one of the most experienced members of the National Assembly that we have. So welcome, good to have you. Naveed Qamar Sahab, I'll just then bring you into that discussion. We're talking about why we haven't had policy consistency when it comes to reforming our energy sector. And then Khurram Hussein's point of view was, and also then Harun Sharif Saab said that, if you have a bad policy and you have a consistency with that creates its own problems. So we've had a bit of that. Now, we are obviously very vulnerable to this energy shock. But this vulnerability will be now tested because we are in the budget season. And the government will have to decide, and people like yourselves will also have to take a position on whether this burden that we have had because of external shock, but also our internal weaknesses, should that burden be shifted to the consumers? Or should the government take the burden and damage its own fiscal space under an IMF program? It's a difficult decision. What should the government do now when it is preparing the budget?
My turn. Thank you. Thank you, and everyone. We are in town, so I will tell them. But my there's the light off. There's no power. So
Not a hybrid model.
and then now it's good. Okay. Thank you very much. Just apologizing for coming in the middle of the session because I was struck by all the VIPs on the road. But yes, it's an interesting time in the sense that Pakistan always has interesting times when it comes to economic policy. But today what we are looking at or paying for is bad policy decisions since at least last few years. This choice we always had. Will we stick to the existing mode of hydrocarbon-based energy, or do we shift to cleaner energy? And time and again with those making decisions, especially when I was not in the government, has been this. In the long term, this is your only choice to go to clean energy, wind power, solar, and you have got unlimited opportunities there. Unfortunately, we are too wedded to our existing policy and contracts, is not just policy, which we have signed with the IPPs over different times, different regimes, and so on. Though we started at 94, when we were really desperate because there was no other option. A lot of those particular IPPs have been decommissioned or voluntarily, forcibly, but they have. So those are not the issue, but the later ones, the 2002 and the ones even after that, which for some reason we thought it was such a good idea to have coal-fired plant in the middle of the country, in the middle of, or some of the more LNG-based plant. The government was not willing to budge on that. There was a stated policy that we will have 10,000 megawatts of solar power. Those given the task of arranging those 10,000 megawatts at the end of the term, they had installed 0. And yet, accountability is accepted as a given. Some people were even promoted. So, having said that, I'm coming to yet. I'm sorry, I'm giving you a long-winded answer. The answer is that there's no shortage. We don't have the fiscal space to absorb the increasing oil prices. Therefore, most of it, if not all, has to be passed on to the consumer today. But does that mean that that's a policy that we should continue with for the rest of the term? And no, it's about time we change it and start shifting. Yes, there's an issue of base load, but the base load you can always create at a limited level. You can't sort of blindly. I remember I made a speech in 2000. Then was it 13, just after our government changed. And I said that it's very sexy to say we have installed so many megawatts and so many megawatts and so many megawatts. Your bottlenecks are elsewhere. You don't have connectivity. You don't have distribution system that is able to stand up to this. Focus on that, of course. Nobody heard it then, later on, they all lamented it. So, yes, plus one more factor. The provinces have to start now playing their role. It's their land on which the solar and wind power will be installed. In some places, they have located the lands even. If Ministry of Power or NEPRA decides that they don't want this power, there's always a market. There are investors waiting to install it, and there are consumers waiting to consume it. Just a matter of who will build the cat, and it's not a difficult cat to buy. So many solutions on this. But if we want an answer today, no.
It is essentially, it boils down to becoming a government. You have to take policy decisions, and that entails a lot of reforms. जिनके ऊपर असमा अब ये भी बात होगी ना, मतलब 28 तरमीम की बात हो रही है, अब उसमें I don't know क्या आएगा, NSC आएगा, क्या आएगा, but these are all issues linked to what Naveed Qamar साहब was saying कि जी गवर्नेंस में बेहतरी लाएं, रिफॉर्म्स करें, तो पॉलिसी भी ठीक हो जाएगी, इसकी बजाय कि आप उसका टेक्निकल सोल्यूशन देखें। लेकिन अगर यही होना था तो फिर हम 70 साल से वेट क्यों कर रहे हैं?
बिकॉज मेरी आवाज आ रही है, अब आ रही है, अच्छा ये लाइट मैंने ऑफ की है तो आई है। एनीवेज, जो नवीद कमर साहब बात कर रहे हैं, मेरा तो बहुत एक आसान सा और सादा सा सवाल है, एंड आई थिंक एवरीबडी सिटिंग ओवर हियर ही और शी इज थिंकिंग द सेम क्वेश्चन कि जो गवर्नमेंट्स है वो जब आती हैं तो उनके हाथ में क्या होता है, यानी हमारी जितनी भी पॉलिसीज हैं वो पब्लिक सेंट्रिक भी नहीं है और वो पब्लिक से पूछ के भी नहीं, यानी उनसे उनकी कंसल्टेशन से भी नहीं आती। क्या वो पब्लिक पॉलिसीज बनती हैं जो कि पार्लियामेंट के अंदर होनी चाहिए वो होती है? क्या पार्लियामेंट वो है जो कि पाकिस्तान के अवाम को रिप्रेजेंट करती है? क्या पाकिस्तान की सियासी जमातें जब अवाम के पास जाती हैं तो वो एक मंशूर नाम की चीज जो कि लेके जाती हैं, वो जो मैनिफेस्टेशन है उसके अंदर क्या ये बताया जाता है कि अगले 4 या 5 साल में आपको कितना एनर्जी के अंदर आपकी हमारी क्या पॉलिसी होगी, एजुकेशन में क्या पॉलिसी होगी, 5 साल अगर आपने तकलीफ उठानी है, जो आप भी बता रहे थे नवीद कमर साहब के, कोई भी शॉर्टकट्स भी नहीं है और पॉलिसीज भी जो है लॉन्ग टर्म है, तो क्या लोगों के पास कोई रोड मैप है, कोई पाथ है कि उनको पता चले कि आफ्टर 5 years ऑफ दिस गवर्नमेंट हम विल बी एबल टू पे दिस मच एंड हमें पूरी सारी जिंदगी जो है वो इतना नहीं देना है? तो मेरा ख्याल है जो पब्लिक है उसके साथ जो डिस्कनेक्ट है, इस जो मैं पहले बात करी थी, एंड आई एम सॉरी आई एम टॉकिंग अगेन ऑन द पॉइंट कि जो एलीट कैप्चर है वो फेल हो रहा है अनफॉर्चुनेटली। ये लोगों के बीच में, लोगों के दरमियान, अगर हम पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम या पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी की बात करते हैं, ना सिर्फ सिस्टम बल्कि वो जो उम्मीद है वो भी नाकाम हो रही है। और उसकी वजह ये है कि जो भी पॉलिसी बन रही है उस पॉलिसी का अवाम के साथ कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है, और जब अवाम के पास इसके साथ कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है तो अवाम उसको ना एक्सेप्ट करते हैं और ना वो इस पोजीशन में है कि वो उसको रिजेक्ट कर सके क्योंकि उनके हाथ में कुछ नहीं है। तो एंड ऑफ द डे आपका जो पॉलिटिकल फेलियर है वो इनफैक्ट आपका गवर्नेंस फेलियर में बदल रहा है और बहुत तेजी के साथ बदल रहा है। तो आई थिंक ये जो एक होप है ये देनी पड़ेगी, ये जो पॉलिसीज हैं ये बतानी पड़ेंगी, आपको रोड मैप देना पड़ेगा, आपको एक क्लियर पाथ देना पड़ेगा। कब तक जो आम आदमी है वो ये कहता रहेगा कि करोड़ों की आबादी में तकरीबन 60 लाख या 80 लाख, चले मैक्सिमम 1 करोड़ आप कह दें, कि वो लोग टैक्स पे करते रहेंगे और जो बाकी लोग हैं वो उनके टैक्स के ऊपर जो है वो अशराफिया जो है वो सब्सिडीज लेती रहेगी या वो अपनी जो उनकी मराहत हैं वो हासिल करते रहेंगे। तो आई थिंक there should be a clear policy for people, and that should be public centric, that should be public related. I mean, पब्लिक को पता हो, अवाम को पता हो कि उनके साथ जो पॉलिसी बनने जा रही है वो क्या है। जब तक ये नहीं होगा फहद साहब, मुझे नहीं लगता कि कोई तब्दीली आएगी। अगले 10 साल भी हम यही बात कर रहे होंगे जो इस वक्त हम बैठ के कर रहे हैं। कोई पॉलिसी नहीं होगी। अभी बजट आने वाला है। क्या आम आदमी ये पूछ सकता है कि आप ये जो सब्सिडी आप लेते हैं तेल के ऊपर, ये सब्सिडी जो है ये सिर्फ गरीब के या आम आदमी, आम सारिफ की जेब से क्यों निकाली जाती है और ये कब तक निकाली जाती रहेगी? चले इतने सालों से लोग जो बर्दाश्त कर रहे हैं, कुछ और साल भी बर्दाश्त कर लेंगे, लेकिन उनको पता तो हो कि उनकी जेब पे डाका जो है ये कब तक चलेगा, या इससे कोई निजात भी मिलेगी कि नहीं मिलेगी। तो ये पब्लिक परसेप्शन जो है वो अब बिल्कुल डिस्कनेक्ट की तरफ जा रही है। और मेरा ख्याल है हमारी जो इलीट है, खास करके जो पॉलिटिकल इलीट है, उसको ये समझने की जरूरत है कि अगर आप ये डिस्कनेक्ट अगर आप अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं तो फिर तो ठीक है, लेकिन अगर नहीं कर सकते तो इसका नतीजा बहुत ही भयानक हो
बिल्कुल,
सकता है।
and obviously, I mean, ये जो disconnect की बात हो रही है, Khurram, if you come to that, and again, what Naveed Kamar Saab was saying, that you have to transfer the burden to the consumer. Now, अब आप उस consumer को आप बोलेंगे कि जी हम क्या करें, what can we do? ये तो we are in the IMF program and the government doesn't have fiscal space, so we are going to give it to you. So I'm sorry, we don't have any choice, and you have to understand. But as Asma is saying, the average Pakistani can say, I don't want to understand. Because every time this happens, you come and you tell me that you have to shoulder the burden of our governance failures, which are happening repeatedly. Obviously, Naveed Kamar Saab fights election. So when he goes to his constituency, I'm sure when he goes next time and he says, we are passing on another 100 rupees, his constituents are going to say, why, hamara kya kasoor hai? Why are you doing it? So this is a continuous thing. Now, but if you bring all of this confusion onto this energy issue that we're talking about, now we are in the middle of a shock. And then 5 years later, we'll be looking back at this shock and saying, what did we do wrong? So is there anything we can do right now while we are in the middle of this shock?
Well, let's pause here to note that despite all this, Naveed Kamar Saab keeps winning elections as well.
Yes.
Right. He hasn't lost.
We have to ask a secret for that because he's
2008
continuously winning.
हारे नहीं है, despite the fact that the common man has been burdened more and more.
You have a record, sir, I think, of winning elections, is it? I think one of the longest records. Unbeaten since
Nine consecutive.
9 consecutive
Wow.
elections. So that's quite a record.
Yes.
So something, something is clearly not working in the feedback loop mechanism that democracy is supposed to serve. Because if that feedback loop was working, Naveed Kamar Saab would lose their election. People would say that under you, the burdens on me increased. I want to run with somebody else. But in any case, that being besides the point I think, partially. The thing to note is that when you have the wrong kind of policy consistency, when you cling to bad policies or policies that you should have outgrown decades ago, I mean, it may have been the right policy for its time, but there is no reason to continue with that policy in this day and age. We can take the IPP as one example, but our tax system is riddled with practices and all kinds of things that should have been left in the dustbin many, many years ago. When you operate like this, what happens is you land up with a system that gives you the worst of both worlds. You have the costs of the private sector and you have the inefficiencies of the public sector combined. So at least, the common citizen should be able to say, if I'm paying a higher price for something, I should at least expect superior service in return for it. But you're not even getting that. So, and our power system is actually a great example of how that's how we've landed up there. We've got some of the highest power tariffs in the region in dollar terms, and some of the highest rates of circular debt accumulation in the region as well. So you've got the inefficiency of the public sector in the circular debt accumulation. You've got the costs of the private sector in the very high power tariffs. And the cost of the circular debt is also something that you're passing on, telling the common citizen, you've got to pay this. The retirement, the penalty, interest charges, all that you have to pay. We fail, you pay. And somehow the whole enterprise just keeps running until, I think as Asma is trying to tell us, until it doesn't anymore. And I think we should be mindful of that. And the power sector is a good example, but you can see the same kind of fiscal dysfunction on the fiscal side. where increasingly they are holding on to a decrepit, outmoded revenue system and far outmoded expenditure mechanisms to monitor expenditures, to oversee procurement. And what you find and what you now getting is that for every rupee of expenditure that the state does, you get less growth in return, less social service delivery outcomes in return. And the same expenditure takes more and more revenue effort to raise the money for. So, every incremental rupee is proving more and more difficult for the state to generate because it's simply failed to broaden the tax net. This failure and how it's wedding the worst of both worlds is quite critical. And that effort is snowballing and it's getting larger and larger. It's got an end point. You can't just keep endlessly going there.
Absolutely. I think we are testing our luck. But now, Dr. Saab, since it's a budget season, I would like all of us to help Naveed Qamar Saab prepare his budget speech. So we'll give you some points also, because the main issue will be energy. I'm sure that is the one that is really pinching. So in this budget, and even beyond the budget, if we have to really fix the energy sector, and specifically, let me come to the petroleum side, because we're talking about the oil shock. We know what we've done wrong in the past. Now is the time where we can actually undertake those governance reforms, which may start paying dividends in the next couple of years. So even if our political decision makers don't have a very long-term vision because of their own short political cycle, but if they are to make a policy so that the next energy shock, when it comes, and it will come, we know that, we are better prepared. What kind of things should somebody like Mr. Naveed Qamar say when he stands up to deliver his budget speech?
Thank you. I think along with many of the deficits, the main deficit that the country is facing is trust deficit. Government has to be very transparent. When we talk of how much it is charging, it should be able to tell us very clearly that yes, we are taking this petroleum development levy because we are not simply passing on the crude Brent price, but also, as the minister was saying in the morning, we have to pay the insurance, we have to pay the freight charges, we have to import some of the refined products which are expensive, etc. So at least the consumers, they should know what they are paying for. And I think that's where government is losing credibility. And when government is losing credibility, many of the things that it is doing better intentionally or unintentionally, that also get lost in the translation. The second important thing is about this targeted relief. As my colleague Sajid also said in the first panel, in targeted relief, we need to expand the target base as we need to expand the tax base. We need to expand the this definition of who can afford and who cannot afford. Benefit income support program, social economic is being used very efficiently, but the base is too narrow. It's not only the two-wheeler or three-wheeler. There are many people in that social economic registry who doesn't own any two-wheeler or three-wheeler. We also need to think of a lower middle income earner or middle income earner who are facing the most brunt. Right now, what I feel in the budget, the upper income earner, perhaps they are insulated. The lowest of the lowest tier income earner, they have nothing left to lose. But it is the lower middle income earner who can't go and stand in the queue for any social safety net or any dole. I think that segment needs to be prioritized and focused. And this is where all the debate and discussion, whether it's within 28th Amendment, whether it's without 28th Amendment, or whether it is in the existing framework, should be focused upon.
Before I go to Harun Sir, we just jump in on this. He mentioned the issue of targeted subsidy, and that is something that the government has also implemented. And again, he mentioned the Benefit Income Support Program, whose whole premise is to provide subsidy to those who actually deserve it. There is also talk of the fact that the provinces should share the burden of the Benazir income support program so that the center has more fiscal space. All of these things are now circulating. So is that the best way to go, and does that actually work in the way that it is intended to work?
But I think obviously there's no ideal situation. There will still be people who will fall through the cracks. There will still be. But I know that in 2008, when I took over as finance minister, that was a time when we said no more diffuse subsidies. We got rid of subsidy at that time on petroleum products. We got rid of subsidy on gas. And I was pushing, but I was prevented, unfortunately, on no more subsidy on electricity. Once you have removed all of those, and you created this program where you're only going to the actual poor, one can have a debate on how accurate the data is. Maybe Abid may have a better view on that, but by and large, it's accepted that this is an accurate way of going to the poorest of it. Whether they'll help us come out of, although I'm just digressing from the energy part, whether it will help us in actually getting people out of poverty, I don't know. We have not really seen any empirical data on that kind of a thing. But at least keeping people above the water and breathing, that way we have managed. Now, when you talk about the two aspects, petroleum levy that we are talking about. Now, why is it a petroleum levy and not a petroleum tax or sales tax? Because the federal government wants all the money. The constitutional mechanism of the divisible pool and then NFC. So this is a way of bypassing. Fine, but then they will use it for whatever are their biggest demands. It has nothing to do with the common man. Which are the three big items in the budget? Number one, debt servicing, which is increasing day by day because we can never earn enough, so we keep borrowing, and we think borrowing is a big achievement somehow. Every time we float a bond or we get IMF or we get whatever, it's all borrowing, but we celebrate that. So that's one big area. Of course, the next big one is defense, and given the circumstances of the last few years, very few people would be able to deny that. And the third one is pensions, 80% being military pensions. But we have not been able to create a mechanism for funding. The world, that's the way the world deals with it. So we take it out of the budget every time. Now, obviously, we'll run out of fiscal space. I'm not in favor of subsidies of particular kinds because inevitably they are misused and pilfered. So be it to the textile sector or be it to the whoever else you are trying to give it. I think we should let the market mechanisms work better over there and be able to allow that. I agree with you. I mean, coming from the history of the socialist era as PPP, I don't believe the public sector can deliver anything right now when it comes to common man. Yeah, I mean, at some point in time, maybe it was necessary, but today, we either go for private sector, incentivize it, but keep strong regulators. We do not have strong regulators. The regulators also work hand in glove with the people they are trying to regulate, including the government. So obviously there has to be transparency there. अगर oil price इस तरह से है और इस तरह से नहीं है या बिजली की price ये है और ये नहीं है, तो who knows कि ये नेपरा और ओगरा और इन्होंने कैसे ये बनाए? then the additional cost, you're not competitive because you have heavy taxation. Why do you have heavy taxation on petroleum or electricity? Because you cannot collect the income tax. You cannot collect well, any indirect tax is still by collected, but no direct tax, which is supposed to be the best form. So masle to hai na, but we can keep on saying, or Asma can keep on blaming the parliamentarians who are the last ones in the trunk of Hayat ki jahan policy banti hai. Jahan policy banti hai, wahan पूछे ना भाई ये इस तरह से क्यों?
वही बनता है पूछना बिल्कुल.
तो इस लिहाज से yes, but having said that, just to say that, yes, more the policies are made in parliament, no matter how inefficient, no matter how ugly, they to whatever extent represent more the will of the people than in the other forums when they are actually being taken. How it is up to us to create the mechanism for doing so. So yes, when we said no more budget being debated on the floors, bring it to us as in committee and we'll go through it line by line. When we did that, the input was there. Government of opposition or सबकी जो suggestions थी, ठीक है, straight jacket में है, we have an IMF program, we cannot have too much leeway in terms of जो deficit है या revenue कम नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन कुछ तो करो ना कि economics को भी देखो, सिर्फ numbers को तो ना देखो. Economic policy should lead to some kind of a benefit to the people. And merely ke FBR should collect more because हमने अपना tax to GDP ratio को बेहतर करना है. That's not good. So that's why we try to bring in a little bit more input. And definitely we would welcome any kind of fresh approach or light, critical or friendly, which would guide us into going in those.
Harun साहब, नवीद कमर साहब ने बहुत बड़ी एक ये बयान दे दिया है. You know, with the People's Party, you can't get more hardcore People's Party than Naveen Kamar Sahib. And he said that government has no role or no business. That's a revolution. I mean, I want your reaction to that.
Thank you, Fahad. No, I think that statement should have come earlier. Because government has no business, first of all, to run businesses. And secondly, there are modern ways of service delivery where you need to adapt to, and technology plays a big role. But somehow our structures have not adjusted. I'll come to power sector. In most of the Asian countries, government does not do pricing of the power sector. That's not government's job. The companies compete. Even in India, actually power is traded like a stock market. You can buy power from 200 companies. Jo aapko sasta de raha ho, aap uske saath book kar lete hain. You know? So now that is, and the gentleman who did that was a very, simple man, R.V. Shahi, a Bengali-based bureaucrat who gave, and Manmohan Singh bought it, and they managed to do that. So all I'm trying to say is that things can happen, but we need to be open-minded that, how the world has moved on to service delivery. That's my first observation. Budget, we give too much importance. As Naveed Kamar Sahib is saying, there isn't much room to play in the budget anyways. It's pre-booked already. Lekin budget in the countries, most countries, is not a policy. It is a financial instrument to finance a policy. लेकिन अगर policy होगी तो budget उसको finance करेगा. But here budget becomes policy because we try and play around, within the budget, as he's saying that budget should be policy oriented, not ticking the IMF box only. So it's at the moment it has shifted. Few suggestions in this debate. I think the things are not that dismal. On the supply side, at least Pakistan has managed that there are no disruptions, in Pakistan of electricity. There are no queues on fuel pumps and stuff. But fundamental points are that government should come up with a very clear roadmap of the change in energy mix. That in 5 years, we will move from here to here, okay? Government should come up very clearly that how are you diversifying sources of supply? Government should come up very clearly that how demand will be managed better. लेकिन हमारी demand. It's a very rare country where internal trade runs on the roads and vehicles which, use petrol. We just don't use the locomotives and rail system which can actually run on alternate fuels. Now that is something which should come. It's an extraordinary time. Certain extraordinary steps need to be announced and meritocracy to be ensured so that people trust that this can happen. Without criticizing, we have an institution called Planning Commission or Ministry of Planning, right? Shouldn't they be working on this kind of model rather than selling the Uran Pakistan or a 3 trillion economy? Let me be very honest. In fact, India in 2014 closed down the Planning Commission. So all I'm trying to say is if the priorities are there, we need to show, and certain signals, they might be populist. I have seen 4 crises globally. I have seen 2008 financial crisis, what Europeans did and others did, the Asian crisis. देखिए कुछ signals तो आप दें austerity के ऊपर भी so that the burden you are passing on to people, they see the change. For instance, if the mayor of London can actually close down all petrol-based cars in central London,
Yes.
why can't we stop these, land cruisers around the parliament? What stops you? That question. That's a signal that we are serious about cutting down the petrol cost, right? There are signals, we can't even close down markets on time, right? There is no carpooling. There is no concept of cutting down the demand of fuel. देखिए ये signals नहीं आते तो people think it's business as usual. It's an extraordinary time. I think we need to do certain extraordinary steps rather than just improving the system we are living in. देखिए ना हमने BISP की बात की. We have no institutional mechanism to support the middle income people. BISP is for the poor people. This particular inflationary pressure which is coming, and I'm sure that Khurram will vouch for that, that is going to hit the middle income and low middle income people very seriously, and they are vulnerable to fall down the poverty trap. So I would suggest that make a combination, and in closing just one sentence, since we have been, dealing on geopolitical rents, why can't we negotiate at least the Iran-Pakistan pipeline as a geopolitical dividend? I don't know where we stand, so that we have an alternative to just depending on few countries for our oil supplies. So these are few thoughts.
Very important. I think we'll continue our discussion. Naveed Qamar Saab has to leave, so I'm going to request him for his final closing remarks based on the discussion that we've had, and then we will continue our discussion.
सिर्फ एक चीज नवीद साहब, शायद आपको दोबारा सोशलिस्ट पॉलिटिक्स की तरफ जाना पड़ेगा।
मुझे पता है कि जब मुझे जाना पड़े तो मेरे साथ कौन कौन खड़ा हो। But thank you. I'm sorry I came in late and I'm running away also. लेकिन I have a PSC meeting to preside. So in conclusion, yes, there is a need for reform and real reform. हम सिर्फ बातें करके और छोड़ देते हैं, that's not reform. Yes, there is a lot of, again, energy pay. I'm again a big proponent of alternate energy and indigenous energy. In those चीजों पे तो हम focus करें. Imported energy was a bad idea. Well, no, it wasn't a bad idea. When it was happening, एक तो prices reasonable थी, and secondly, we had the wherewithal to be able to do it. Lekin no more. So clearly a roadmap has to be made, how to indigenize our energy. So जो आप कहते हो कि government दे ना कि एक plan, एक kind of wishy-washy बात ना करे. एक तरफ आप कहते हैं जी वो छतों पे जो लगे हुए हैं solar panels, उनको भी हम खत्म करना चाहते हैं. What signal is that? यहाँ ठीक है गरीब के घर पे नहीं लगे हुए, ये मे भी मिडिल इनकम के घर पे लगे हुए हैं. Lekin you are saying that you want to discourage that because you want to sell your dirty energy. That's not a good policy signal. उसके साथ जब आप कहते हो कि ये हमने इम्पोर्टेड फ्यूल पे नहीं डिपेंड करना, तो बताओ कि डोमेस्टिक जो फ्यूल है उस पे आप क्या आगे बढ़ रहे हो? विंड सोलर अपनी जगह पे, बट इवन जो है hydro has always been the policy makers' favorite. Takes them years to make it, but nevertheless they like. And now, of course, जब अपना अगर for example coal है, तो use that. If I told you have to use coal-fired plants, not imported coal in Saiwa. So we have to be clear कि अगर national की बात करते हैं तो national तब है जब हम सब benefit करेंगे. And at the end of the day, I think government should encourage these things rather than discourage them. And we want to see कि आप जो ला रहे हैं budget, and their budget becomes a policy tool. उसमें कितना वो encourage करेंगे indigenous energy sources को rather than imported. Thank you. I'm sorry I have to run off.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We continue. So, I'll just pick up from where Harun Saab said. Okay, the fact is that we are going through such difficult times, and the signaling to people, just giving them economic arguments that you have to share our burden, but not showing anything that you are doing yourself. We hear about austerity measures and all that, but do we see them? Do we see any major change in the way that government is reducing its own expenditure? Now, in the larger scheme of things, people say that that cutting that expenditure really doesn't make a big difference. But in terms of sheer optics, and to address what Dr. Abis already said, the trust deficit, optics are important. Why can't we do that? What is the problem? Is it the sheer inability of the decision makers to actually break out of the certain system that they're used to?
Something tells me Asma Shirazi has a better answer to this question than I do.
But try.
I think at the very top, our decision makers are wedded to their luxuries. They have to make their investments in winning an election worth their while, and there is something about conspicuous consumption as a culture that seems to resonate with the voters. And they have found that. Now, every time a picture of the Punjab's chief minister holding an expensive Dolce Gabbana bag, for example, like I think in the visit just now to Azerbaijan, goes viral and everyone shares it on social media. On social media, you might see some amount of disapproval of these expensive accessories. But I think among the voters there are enough people who say, "Hi, kya baat hai?" I may be wrong, but I think there is something in our culture that looks up to conspicuous consumption and admires people that wear expensive shoes and carry expensive handbags, loves to hate them, but loves to hate them as much as they hate them for it. And I think to some extent these people have figured that out. And I think therein may lie one of the reasons to the question I asked. I mean, how is it that the burden on the common citizenry has increased over the years, and yet Naveed Kumar Saab keeps winning elections in his Lanka? They've all managed to figure this out at some level and have figured out how to lock in the system without necessarily rigging. My ishara was not towards rigging in asking that. It was actually winning fairly and squarely, but capturing the mind and the imagination of the voter in a way that runs counter to the spirit of democracy, where voters are supposed to hold their elected leaders to account and not admire them as celebrities and turn them into princelings. But somehow in our culture that happens, and we've seen that even in India. In Indian culture, elected representatives do start. The same dynamic works over there too. So I mean, there's something regional about it. And
It's actually, I think yes, it's something that we tend to talk about very frequently. और खासतौर पे, you know, when there's a crisis like the one today, जो यानी इससे ज्यादा बड़ा बहरान तो नहीं हो सकता कि आप 450 रुपए का आप लीटर खरीद रहे हैं और आपका जो लोगों के जो पर्सनल बजट्स हैं वो तबाह हो गए और उसमें भी अगर वो ये देखें कि जी सरकार जो है वो अपनी जो है किसी भी तरीके से बेल्ट टाइटनिंग नहीं कर रही, तो उससे ज्यादा ऑप्टिक्स खराब क्या हो सकते हैं। अब ऑस्टेरिटी मेजर्स अनाउंस तो हो गए, पता नहीं कितने फॉलो हो रहे हैं कितने नहीं हो रहे। मुझे तो अभी भी वही बड़ी बड़ी गाड़ियां नजर आ रही हैं, वही प्रोटोकॉल नजर आ रहा है, सब वही नजर आ रहा है, कोई भी चेंज नजर नहीं आता। तो क्या प्रेशर गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर प्रेशर होता ही नहीं है उसमें? वोटर का प्रेशर नहीं है, लोगों का प्रेशर नहीं है, या वो मैटर ही नहीं करता हो?
मेरे ख्याल है जब गवर्नमेंट्स को ये पता हो कि उनको सिर्फ एक खास हल्के को खुश करना है और फिर हुकूमत में आ जाना है, तो फिर उनको क्या जरूरत है कि वो पब्लिक को खुश करे। जब उनको पता है कि उनके लिए फॉर्म 47 भी बन जाएगा, फॉर्म 49 भी बन जाएगा, फॉर्म 50 भी बन जाएगा और वो गवर्नमेंट में आ जाएंगे, तो उनके ऊपर कौन सा प्रेशर होगा। एंड देन अभी अगर आप देखिए कि पिछले 4 साल से जो मौजूदा सेटअप है, ये जो हाइब्रिड प्लस सिस्टम है, ये पिछले 4 साल से तो चल रहा है। इस 4 साल के अंदर ये क्या कह के आए थे कि हम ये कम कर देंगे, हम वो कम कर देंगे, बिजली बहुत है, पंखे भी जलते थे, सब कुछ हमने देखा ना। मतलब ये ऑप्टिक्स जो लोगों के लिए कि हम आपके लिए बहुत कुछ करेंगे, बट एंड ऑफ द डे आफ्टर 4 years आप और मैं ये डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि अब दोबारा हमें क्या देखना है, क्या करना है। सो यू नो मेरा ख्याल है कि जो पब्लिक की, जो आवाम की जो प्रायोरिटी, जो उनको प्रायोरिटी देना है, जो उनको तरजीह बनाना है, दैट इज नॉट विजिबल इन द पॉलिसीज। एंड अभी जो बात कर रहे थे खुरम के, वो जब आपके लीडर्स बड़े बड़े महंगे कपड़े जूते और वो पहन के जाएंगे, कोई हर्ज नहीं है, दे कैन अफोर्ड, आई थिंक उनको करना चाहिए। उससे लोगों को फर्क भी कोई नहीं पड़ता। बल्कि हम एक सियासतदान से सवाल कर रहे थे एक दफा, उससे हमने पूछा कि भाई आप जब बड़ी बड़ी गाड़ियों में जाते हैं तो लोग आपको कहते कुछ नहीं। उसने कहा जी हम पैदल भी गए थे तो लोगों ने कहा जी अपने लिए कुछ नहीं कर सके, साढ़े वास्ते की करेगा। सो हमें बड़ी गाड़ी पे जाना पड़ा, तो वो कहते हैं जी हमें अच्छे कपड़े पहनने पड़ते हैं, कि लोग कहते हैं तो खुद बड़ा गरीब है, हमारे लिए क्या करेगा। सो यू नो ये जो थिंकिंग है ये पाकिस्तान के अंदर ये मौजूद है। एक तो इसको चेंज करने की जरूरत है। लेकिन जो बात नवीद कमर साहब कह रहे थे या यहाँ बहुत से लोग कह रहे हैं, हम और आप फाद साहब या फरम साहब, हम आवाम से बहुत ज्यादा रेगुलरली मिलते हैं, इंटरेक्ट करते हैं। हमें पता है कि लोगों के अंदर इस वक्त जो है ना, ये नहीं है कि उनके साथ, उनके लिए निजाम के अंदर नफरत है या वो इस निजाम से नफरत करते हैं, उनको इस निजाम की परवाह नहीं है। और जब आप बिल्कुल डिस्कनेक्ट हो जाता है कि मतलब डज नॉट मैटर कि भाई कौन आ रहा है कौन जा रहा है, क्या करेगा क्या नहीं करेगा, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि उनके पास चॉइस मौजूद नहीं है, और चॉइस नहीं है तो उनके पास होप नहीं है कि कुछ ठीक भी होगा। तो मेरा ख्याल है ये जो आप एक नाउमीदी सिस्टम के अंदर दे रहे हैं, जो पॉलिटिकल सेटअप्स के अंदर है, पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज के अंदर है, और फिर वही बात है कि आपके अखराजात कम नहीं है, आप आते हैं तो आप क्या कहते हैं, आप जा रहे होते हैं तो आप कहते हैं खजाना खाली है। सवाल ये है कि आपने लोगों को आप दे क्या रहे हैं। मसलन ये 8 बजे की आप कह रहे थे कि मार्केट्स बंद हो जाएंगी, किसी को नहीं पता कि 8 बजे आपने जब मार्केट्स बंद की तो उससे कंजम्पशन कितनी हुई है, बचत कितनी हुई है। किसी को ये नहीं बताया गया कि हमने ये फैसला लिया था तो क्यों लिया है, और हम इसको रिवर्स कर रहे हैं तो हम इसको क्यों रिवर्स कर रहे हैं। अच्छा, क्योंकि आपका वोट बैंक जो है वो ट्रेडर्स का है और आप उसका प्रेशर बर्दाश्त नहीं कर सकते, लिहाजा आपने उसको रिवर्स किया है। अच्छा, आप एग्रीकल्चर के ऊपर टैक्स नहीं लगाते, वो जो इलीट है उसको आप नवाजते हैं, क्योंकि एक जमात का जो एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर उनका इंटरेस्ट है और उनका वोट बैंक वहां का है, वो उसको टाइट नहीं करते हैं। अच्छा, जो मिडिल क्लास है, उस मिडिल क्लास से बिलोंग करने वाली पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को इस बात की परवाह ही नहीं है कि मिडिल क्लास के ऊपर इस वक्त क्या बीत रही है और उसकी आवाज क्या उठानी है, उसके अपने बहुत से मसाइल जो है वो उसके अंदर इंगेज है। सो मेरा तो सबसे बड़ा सवाल ये है कि इस पॉलिटिकल एंटिटी के अंदर हमें एक इतना बड़ा गैप नजर आ रहा है इतना बड़ा खला हो रहा है कि जिसको कोई पुर नहीं कर सक रहा और ना कर पाएगा, और यहाँ तक के वो टाइम आएगा जबकि लोग जो हैं वो या तो तंग आमद बजंग आमद होंगे, या फिर वो इस पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम से बिल्कुल इररेलेवेंट होके अपने घरों में बैठे होंगे। और वो ना एक जमहूरी मुल्क में ये हो सकता है, वो मार्शल लॉ से भी बदतर सिचुएशन हो सकती है, और वो मेरा ख्याल है कि हम उसकी तरफ बढ़ सकते हैं अगर यही सूरत हाल रही।
That's a very dangerous and alarming conclusion. But Dr. Abisoleri, so I'm going to take that difficult question now to you. As a co-host, you have to try and answer that. We've talked about two things: the original topic of energy challenges, and now the trust deficit that you talked about, and then everybody else is also talking about that. So how do you link trust deficit to energy challenge?
Well, thank you. And this is what I said in the beginning, that although the topic is energy, but today energy, economy, political economy, and geopolitics, everything has somehow converged. And one of the manifestation of its convergence is socio-economic unrest that I told you is happening in many countries. Thanks God, Pakistan is still not there, but yes, the first thing, next budget I foresee it would be a difficult fiscal year than the outgoing fiscal year. We were quite lucky that this Gulf shock, it actually occurred when first 10 months of our fiscal year were already passed. So the numbers for this fiscal year would not be that bad, but for the next fiscal year, it would be quite challenging, both to set up numbers, both to achieve those targets. And that's where transparency and better communication, it matters. That's where this symbolic gestures, as Arun said, it doesn't make me any difference if there is a land cruiser flying around parliament or not, but it would give a good gesture if it's not. Many of the austerity measures are taken by Parliament, are taken by the cabinet. Perhaps they are peanuts in the larger scheme of things, but at least if they are implemented properly, they will give some sort of consolation to those who have to cut down their budget, and when they have to prioritize whether to pay the rent of their house or whether to pay the utility or whether to spend on health expenditure. So those people, they need to get some sort of consolation, and that can only happen through better communication and through bringing transparency in decisions. If we are prioritizing certain expenditures, why? And if we are cutting down certain expenditures, why? And if we are raising some revenue, why? These are the three questions that need to be, I think, answered in the next budget, and perhaps it can somehow give some answers to the unasked questions that the people, they are not raising right now, but those are simmering in their minds.
Fair enough. And I think so. So now let's try and bring our discussion together as we move towards closing it. Harun Sharif Sahab, now based on this overall broad parameters of the discussion that we've had, if you take this energy issue, which most likely is going to remain the primary concern for an average Pakistani, probably also for the government, and this oil shock, even if the war ends tomorrow, is going to continue for a while. So we are in it for a while. So the government in many ways is going to be judged by how it handles this crisis, and whether it does so as a knee-jerk reaction, or whether it actually says कि नहीं, हम अब थोड़ा सा देर पाकिस्तान की इस्लाहात के लिए कुछ इरादा रखते हैं, और फिर बताएं भी सही कि हम ये करने जा रहे हैं. If you take this energy, the way they handle energy as an example of how they are handling the economic crisis of Pakistan, what does that tell you? And so far, what you've heard and how you've seen the government handle it. The government का ये कहना है कि जी हमारी बहुत बड़ी कामयाबी ये है कि आप पेट्रोल भरवाने जाएं तो आपको पेट्रोल मिल रहा है, और ये बड़ी कामयाबी वो टाउट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, अच्छी बात है, but put this energy crisis in the larger context and tell us, what you see.
First thing, discussed, जैसे आप कह रहे हैं, one is the immediate reaction. Immediate reaction is that a minimum business continuity is ensured. Life chalti rahe, no? So that is where, unfortunately, that is where the policymakers' imagination ends most of the times. कि जी हमने shock आया and हमने disruption नहीं होने दी, and people, kept on going. The impacts which are multifaceted, this war के जो आपके आ रहे हैं, oil crisis के, it's not only the price of fuel. The impacts are changing geopolitical alliances. Impact will be on our exports. Impact will be on our remittances. The impact would be basically the way of life, the cost of doing business. होता क्या है, सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट पास ऑन नहीं करती, प्राइवेट सेक्टर की भी जो कॉस्ट ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस बढ़ती है ना, वो भी कंज्यूमर को पास ऑन होती. Let's assume that I have made bumper profits. Would I actually think that, okay, next year I take a little lesser and give I don't think there is any such thing, a dialogue between private sector and the state and the people or consumer protection agencies, which actually happens. So now there are deeper, ये जो war hai, when I study more and more, one can see the plans are, the greater Israel and their, American, geopolitics. But the oil factor is the single most important factor in this war, that how Strait of Hormuz will be managed, how it will be governed, will petrodollars hold, will other countries jump into that? So it's a much deeper thinking which Pakistan has to do, both because a country which has used geopolitics as a tool to run the country. लेकिन हमने तो एक मॉडल ऐसा बना लिया हुआ है ना. Now the question arises, जो मैं अर्ज कर रहा हूं, that there is no choice, that vulnerability of Asia, whether it's China, Japan, India, or Pakistan, 75% of the dependence of fuels is on Strait of Hormuz-led, passage. Can we rely on that? We cannot. The risk is far too high. तो choice कोई नहीं है जब आपको ये बदलना है. Supply side की diversification, as I said, demand side management, and more importantly, you need to move towards significant share of your energy mix on indigenous and cheaper and sustainable and climate friendly fuels. अब वो करने के लिए अब सबसे मेरा सवाल है, ये जो कह रही हैं आसमा बिल्कुल ठीक कह रही हैं, that people are becoming indifferent. Indifference इस चीज का है that perhaps we don't trust on the institutions and people that they can deliver because of a perpetual failure of delivery. जब बार बार होता है तो वो कहते हैं मैं इन पे दोबारा से कैसे ट्रस्ट कर दूं ना. We need to bring in people who inspire confidence. We need to start communication better. When I was, 10 years, as you know, I advised the UK Prime Ministers and others. उसके अंदर ये था कि we used to write a white paper, we put it to public for debate. ये हमारा है, हमें criticize कीजिए, but engagement का एक tool बनाते हैं ना. मैं आपको IMF की example देता हूँ. Since I've done it from the other side, I was surprised. I was talking to the mission head just, a couple of days back, in fact yesterday. So वो हमने कोई war की cost के ऊपर कोई independent paper नहीं. That what is the cost of this war on Pakistan? Now these institutions actually negotiate with you on independent evidence, not what client is saying. So these are the tools which countries use. आज अगर एक independent लोगों ने कहा होता कि पाकिस्तान को इतनी cost पड़ रही है, these are the vulnerable sectors and fund should look at it. Then there's a debating point. Now the debating points are that how do we meet the future prior actions? Because you don't have, मेरे हिसाब से जैसे COVID का shock था, the cost of Iran war is a very, very powerful tool to negotiate. So we need to start thinking that business as usual will not yield us what we are talking. People who have not done these things are still in the old school mindset. They might keep on winning elections, but the delivery will fail. And frankly speaking, आजकल के हालात में आप तो austerity की बात कर रहे हैं, and I'll close on that. One simple policy choice is that we will not make more roads or infrastructure for 2 years. We will rather go public transport way or cheaper fuels way. Next day आपने कहा जी हम ये मोटरवे भी बना रहे हैं, हम मरगदा रोड को ले जा रहे हैं, मोटरवे तक ले जा रहे हैं. Somehow we think that somebody will come and bail us out when we are in trouble. ये mentality जो है, it's not people centric, it's not sustainable. You need to give very clear signals, and Pakistan has an opportunity actually on my closing thing with this crisis. Provided we put together an economic value proposition when people are looking at new markets. उनका बहुत ज़्यादा Gulf पे dependence is shaken. लेकिन उसके लिए we need to put the best minds in the world to help us out, move there.
That's a good point, Khurram. And then I'll ask Asma to give the last word. There is much talk of how we've gained diplomatic dividends because of all of this. And as Arun Sir was saying, that this is a great moment for us to not only attract investment and other opportunities, or when regional dynamics are changing, but also because of the leverage that we gain because of our mediation now. We don't know where it's going to go, but still we've already earned a lot of dividend. The debate now is, okay, if we have that leverage, what should we do with it? And the normal talk that I hear or suggestions that I hear is, well, maybe we can get a better deal with IMF, or maybe we can get some debt relief, or maybe we can get some more investment. Are we actually ready for that, as Arun Sir was saying? And if we really need to be ready to really negotiate well whenever this conflict ends and use the goodwill that we've actually achieved, what should we do to actually prepare for this?
I think this question is an example of what I was talking about earlier, of us being very wedded to old ways of thinking, even when those old ways of thinking have outlived their utility. This is a question that I'm routinely asked on the air when I come on television and in public gatherings and whatnot. The problem here is that the old way of thinking, again, is the geopolitical rent from where we finance our next generation of economic growth. And that instinct is kicking in all over again. I think whatever they do, whatever dividends come via this diplomacy, if they come in the form of dollars, landing in Pakistan the way they did after 9/11, the way they did after 1979, if they come in that sort of a form, then there may yet be one more very short-lived and a very shallow economic boom in Pakistan bubble that they would definitely tout as evidence of their success while it lasts. And they would aim to stretch it just long enough till they have to go back to the people to seek yet another mandate and hope that whatever trickles down from this economic boom will provide them their next votes. One more election won on the back of that. They would hope that. It may or may not work out that way for them. The fact of the matter is, we are standing where we are, and we are having this conversation precisely because we've been doing it like that for the past 70 years. And we need to move away from that. We need to now realize that things that we are holding on to and clinging on to are what are causing us to sink. If we don't figure out a reform path forward, if we don't figure out the importance of having to change and how to change, and really implement that change, then geopolitical rents is the only other way forward. So I think the conversation around the geopolitics, the successes that they've managed to score in the diplomacy should not deplete oxygen from the reform conversation, which needs to stand on its own feet. And that's something we have to do regardless of what the geopolitical scenario is.
Is the reform conversation any different from what we've been hearing all these years? This time around, do you feel any different?
I don't hear much of a reform conversation anymore. It has died. Post-COVID, it has basically died. Now we've got reforms are competing with amnesty schemes as ideas for mobilizing resources to pay for your economic growth. You fail to generate savings, so you come up with amnesty schemes. We've had more amnesty schemes in the past 15 years than we've had in the preceding 50. And I could give you more and more examples like that. But there's no reform conversation left in this country. So to me, that's a big tragedy. And I think reviving that, absolutely, reviving that and getting those ideas back up. When I meet with our friends in the civil service over here, even in private conversation, they say, "Yaar, kuch to bataye na, kya kare?" They're asking me, and I'm saying, "Yaar, agar baat Khurram Hussain tak aa gayi hai na, to you are in real trouble." Okay, because my job is not to provide solutions. I mean, there are people out there who have ideas on that. Find them, talk to them, structure your approach, bring them together in organized forums, have outputs come out, get the feedback those outputs require, make them the policy, and then start implementing it, for God's sakes. But it doesn't work like this. It doesn't work like you meet one guy and he tells you, "Yeah, here's a great idea. Aap aisa kare, turnover tax ka threshold na 2 percentage points नीचा कर देना तो एकदम से ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा." That's the kind of thinking that in Karachi we call jugaad. I'm not sure if we call it the same over here, but that's jugaadu kind of thinking. And that's not the way to drive your reform effort in this.
So finally, we are now wrapping up our conversation, and then of course we have. Let me also welcome Mr. Bilal Kiani, Minister of State for Finance, for joining the panel. He's here for a little while. So Asma, अब ये बात हो रही थी और वो he's saying that he's not hearing any conversation for reform. So which means that we are all we're talking about reform and what can happen. And Khurram was saying that even the conversation has died. Of course, we're talking in terms of the energy shock, but trying to extrapolate from there. So do you hear this urgency to change things, change system, shake it up, and bring in revolutionary policies और एक इनकलाबी किस्म की इस्लाहात का एक मुहिम जो है वो शुरू होने जा रही है? आप सुन रही हैं?
अब बिलाल साहब भी आ चुके हैं and I think he is the best person to answer also जो हमारे questions हैं उसके ऊपर questions क्या है कि पिछले यानी मैं रिपीट किए देती हूँ कि 4 बरस हो गए हैं इस सेटअप को. ये जो बंदोबस्त है, मैं इसको बंदोबस्त कहती हूँ, इस बंदोबस्त को 4 बरस हो गए और अभी तक हमें ये नहीं पता चला कि इन 4 बरसों में इस बंदोबस्त के तहत हमने क्या अचीव किया. मसलन हमने सुना SIFC बन गई, बहुत हमने उस पर प्रोग्राम्स भी किए कि बड़ा इनकलाब आ जाएगा और कोई ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन आएगा और चीजें बिल्कुल बदल जाएंगी और बड़ी डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट हो जाएगी और पता नहीं लोग कहाँ कहाँ से आ जाएंगे. अब मुझे अब बताइए कि आज फिर ये सवाल पूछ रही हूँ, हो सकता है मुझे जवाब मिल जाए बिलाल साहब से कि SIFC बड़ी कामयाब हो गई थी और उसने बहुत कुछ कर लिया पाकिस्तान के अंदर और उसका जो इनकलाबी कदम उठाया गया था उसका क्या फायदा था, जिसको समहाउ वी एक्सेप्ट, या हमने उसको ना सिर्फ एक्सेप्ट किया है बल्कि हम उसको ये भी कहते हैं कि वो एक्स्ट्रा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एक जो काम था वो हुआ था. अच्छा, फिर उसके बाद हम ये सुनते हैं कि हमने जी बहुत ऑस्टेरिटी के लिए हमने बहुत कुछ किया है. हमें नहीं पता कि उस ऑस्टेरिटी के अंदर हमें कितनी बचत हुई है, हमने कितना उसके अंदर लोगों को ये होप दी है कि आपका जो लाइफस्टाइल है उससे ज्यादा हमने अपने आप को उसके मुताबिक ढाला है या हम अपने आप को उसी के मुताबिक कर रहे हैं. हमें नहीं पता कि ये जो 70% आपकी यूथ है उसका वे फॉरवर्ड उसके लिए आपने क्या बनाया है. कोई यूथ पॉलिसी आप लेके आ रहे हैं, कोई उनके लिए आपने कोई अगर है कोई तो हमें क्यों नहीं पता उसका, ये भी एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल है. फिर इसी तरह से यानी एनर्जी के ऊपर आप देखें कि आपके जितना सोलर से लेके जितने भी आपके ऑल्टरनेटिव आपके पास मौजूद है एनर्जी, उसके टूल्स को आपने कितना एक्सप्लोर किया है. और इस जंग में ये जो अभी एक रीशेप होगी दुनिया, ये जब जंग खत्म होगी तो उसके बाद एक पूरा सिस्टम, एक पूरा वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर बदल जाएगा. उस वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर में हम ये इसमें कोई शक नहीं, हमने बहुत कामयाबी हासिल की है और हमने एक अचीवमेंट किया है कि हमने इस पूरी दुनिया के अंदर अपने आप को सेंटर स्टेज पे रखा है और अभी तक रखा है। मगर उस सेंटर स्टेज को हमने आगे कैसे लेके जाना है, शायद ये किसी ड्राइंग रूम के अंदर तो ये बातचीत होगी, लेकिन पब्लिक को इसके बारे में नहीं पता है, पार्लियामेंट को इसके बारे में नहीं पता है, जो कि पार्लियामेंट के अंदर डिस्कशन होना चाहिए। देन फिर आप ये देखिए कि ये जो हमने ईरान के साथ अपने ताल्लुकात कैसे बनाने हैं, हमने चीन से हमारे पास बहुत सारी चीजें हो रही हैं, हमने अफगानिस्तान के साथ अपने रास्ते बंद किए हैं, हमने किर्गिस्तान के साथ अपने रास्ते खोले हैं, बहुत कुछ हो रहा है, इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि इस लेवल के ऊपर जियो पॉलिटिक्स के अंदर पाकिस्तान बहुत कुछ कर रहा है और उसके समरात हो सकता है कुछ अरसे के बाद आए, लेकिन उसका एक प्लेटफॉर्म है और वो प्लेटफॉर्म है पाकिस्तान की पार्लियामेंट। मुझे बड़ी डिसअपॉइंटमेंट है एज अ पॉलिटिकल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट कि हम उस पार्लियामेंट के अंदर ना तो ये गवर्नमेंट जवाबदेह है, ना वो गवर्नमेंट ये बताती है, ना बता सकती है। अभी बजट आने वाला है, 5-10 दिन रह गए हैं, कोई डिबेट नहीं है, कोई यानी एक ऐसे लग रहा है कि मोनोलॉग चल रहा है, यानी गवर्नमेंट खुद ही फैसले लेती है, खुद ही करती है, खुद ही बताती है और खुद ही इंप्लीमेंट करती है। मुझे और शहबाज राना को तो शायद सवाल करने की भी इजाजत नहीं है, क्योंकि हमने मुस्बत रिपोर्टिंग करनी है, हमने कोई ऐसी जो डायरेक्शंस आती हैं उसके ऊपर अमल दरामद करना है हमारे चैनल्स ने, और हम वो सवाल नहीं पूछ सकते। इस आइडियल इन्वायरमेंट के अंदर भी आप देखिए कि वो 1 पेज जो है, वो 1 पेज अवाम को अगर डिलीवर नहीं कर पा रहा तो फिर बड़ा सीरियस क्वेश्चन है, और वो रिफॉर्म्स के हवाले से है। मेरा ख्याल है कि अब 4 साल के बाद, अब अगर आपने रिफॉर्म्स के ऊपर नहीं जाना, अब आपने इशराफिया से टैक्स नहीं लेना, अब अगर आपने अवाम से टैक्स लेना है और लेवी के जरिए से 600 रुपए तक आप पहुंच जाएंगे जो IMF आपको डिमांड्स दे रही है, तो मेरा ख्याल है कि फिर नहीं रोक सकेगा कोई भी अवाम को सड़कों पे आने के लिए।
Well said. So, Bilal Sab, now, of course, we are talking in terms of this major energy shock that has come, how the government is planning to deal with it. And we, of course, with the budget around the corner, what are going to be the main priorities of the government? Again, in terms of larger immediate concern, larger reform program, and how that will reflect in the government's economic priorities in the upcoming budget. So, the floor is yours. Give us a detailed answer and elaboration on what the government is thinking. You want to make it or English? First of all, I'm grateful to Mike.
Can you hear? Firstly, I'm grateful to express to Fahd Saab, Shahbaz Saab has been in touch, and STPI of Rabidus. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity today. And I think it's a very timely event, given everything that's going on, both in the global context and the conflict between US and Iran and the impact it has had on the global energy markets and the impact it has had on Pakistan. So I think there has never been a better time to have this discussion. I know, because I've met him today, I know that the Minister of Petroleum was with you this morning, and he mentioned that he spoke here. And I think he was one of the most relevant people, because I know that there's a government committee, a very high-level government committee that meets on a daily basis on energy matters. It spends at least an hour and a half or 2 hours specifically dealing with the energy situation given the ongoing conflict. And this committee, or a different version of it, has been dealing with this from day one of this conflict. As soon as the first sparks flew, so to speak, I think the Prime Minister immediately realized that we need to be ahead of this. And that's why he immediately ensured that the key ministers on a daily basis were monitoring it. And that's why you've seen that, unlike various other countries, we've not had a single day of supply constraints, of fuel supply constraints. Price as well, to the extent that was possible initially, 129 billion rupees were spent from the already limited resources to ensure that price transmission could be constrained for as long as was possible. But now, I think where we are, obviously, I think it just gives us more impetus and cause to accelerate and prioritize whatever energy security measures we are already pursuing. I think, if we start with solar, solar has been, a saving grace for us, given the solarization that Pakistan has seen, and this has been introduced in the previous PMLN governments, and that is why you've got a very large number of electricity consumers who are on the grid as net metering consumers, but also off the grid, especially in rural areas. I see this in my constituency. I see this in the villages, in District Jhelum, and that's just, that's anecdotal examples or evidence that I see myself firsthand when I visit various urban and rural parts. So it's a reality, and I think there is no doubt in the Prime Minister's mind and the government's mind that solar is the way to go. A lot has been said about the recent changes in the solar policy. I think the Power Minister has really tried to do a good job of communicating that recently on Parliament and in various forums. And the idea is that the government is pro-solar and the government wants to promote solar. I think that the net metering contracts for the existing customers remain as they were. And for new customers, there is now a net billing mechanism. However, even that, from a payback perspective, remains attractive for the Pakistani citizen. So solar remains a major priority. I think in addition to that, there's a real focus internally that hydel is pursued in a more meaningful manner. It's, I think the focus and priority has always been there, but given the magnitude and upfront capital expenditure required for these projects, finding resources has always been an issue. And so we are working on that to be able to prioritize projects like the Amir Bhasha, Dasu, not just from a perspective of having clean energy and hydel energy, but also from our water security standpoint. We've seen how water has been weaponized in the past. And so from that perspective, it achieves dual objectives. I think Ali, when he came in this morning, I assume must have spoken also about the refinery upgradation focus. And I think that's important on two counts. One, because we obviously need to be able to be as self-sufficient as possible, but also the energy we use, even the fuel that we use, needs to be cleaner than it is. I think the refinery production that happens right now, it's not all of it is Euro 5, and that has climate related and health related implications. So the refinery upgradation is also critical from that standpoint. But having said that, I think EVs are the way to go. And as cautiously as one can, a few days ahead of the budget, I'll venture to say that we're working on a few things where you really can see a prioritization for electric vehicles in the upcoming budget. So because we really feel that is the way to go. We've had a lot of internal debates chaired by the Prime Minister on this topic. He really feels very strongly about the fact that electric vehicles are the way to go. And we are working hard to make sure we can meaningfully reflect that in policy in the coming days. And there is also a firm belief that I think just like solar, with electric vehicles as well, if we can do a good job of policy making, which results in the availability of the right product at the right market, at the right price in the market, I think it will take off the way solar did. I think the reason solar succeeded is because you had solar available in the markets at the right price. And once that market existed, I think the citizen, him or herself, just made sure they didn't need any nudging, they didn't need any help financing. People found a way. Once it made economic sense and there was availability in the market, I think it just took off. So I believe that it will be the same with electric vehicles. I'll just say a couple of things very briefly. I think Asma Saiba, we appear on her show as well and try to answer her questions, although it's been a while now, but I hope to be there again soon. No. It's, it's always a pleasure. I myself we've just been a bit busy with preparations for the budget, but in the upcoming days, I think with the budget coming in on the first week of June, obviously, I think the government has a responsibility to then communicate that budget on various fora, and myself and the rest of the members of our economic team, especially from finance, we will try our best to do that. But I would like to say that Parliament is very, very important. Shehbaz Saab is here, and there are a few other reporters who've seen this. There's hardly a standing committee that we miss, and we remain answerable to the senators and the members of the National Assembly and the chairpersons of the two standing committees. And on various issues, whatever issue they demand, we try to answer and explain, and that is our job, and that remains a forum. So you'll see that again in the budget. Once the budget is presented, I'll just.
No, because we have a little technical problem.
Right.
Just stop you for a second, because we are going, live
Right.
and vote, just 2 minutes.
अच्छा 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 चलो सर, ये तो अच्छी बात है कि मुझे शायद नहीं पता था कि लाइव जा रहा है, तो मैंने आप तो उसका
If it's not a media, it didn't happen. So you need to just fix that quickly.
ब्रेकिंग न्यूज तो आ गई है उस ईवीज के बाद।
जी फिर सर मैं
सारा
इधर
बजट अभी इधर आउट करवा के।
फिर सर मैं इधर से गाड़ी में बैठ के खरी चला सर मैंने आपको क्या गवर्नमेंट टीवी पे फोकस पे
Maybe this is an important thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's announcing it is important.
नहीं,
Not announcing it.
people are also very interested in के ये इसके अंदर जो EVs और इसके हवाले से।
नहीं जी, वो मुझे क्योंकि थोड़ा सा इस बात पे एतमाद, इसलिए मैं as cautious
नहीं, that's
as I
good.
could, I've tried
नहीं,
to
नहीं।
say this too. But obviously budget के दौरान थोड़ा सा एहतियात, before the budget we have to be as careful as possible. कोई ऐसी उम्मीद ना छिड़ जाए
हाँ, जो बाद में ना हो।
बाद में।
Right. हाँ,
सर ये अब
ऑफ द रिकॉर्ड।
नहीं मुझे बता दें, हाँ
हाँ, ऑफ द रिकॉर्ड।
बताइएगा। नहीं, that is the particular focus. This particular aspect remains. It's totally got it. So basically, I mean, if you see it, I think the way it should be seen is कि 1,000 people, that price, that then there can be a significant gap between that and the luxury. But even the luxury EV should be slightly more attractive than the luxury internal combustion. Yes. So that's sort of the thought process on which we're trying to work. सर मैंने आपको अंग्रेजी को परम साहब मैंने अंग्रेजी में इसलिए यही बात की थी थोड़ी सी कि अगर आप सही गाड़ी सही कीमत पर मार्केट में for the
सही बात
it will
है।
just
बहुत बड़ी बजट।
हमें I think we will not need to provide any financing. You do not need to provide any financing for solar. Once the right product is there, people will buy it themselves.
Yes, yes.
Once here. So I was just speaking about Parliament. I think the Parliament is very, very important for us. In fact, it's the most important forum. I felt as a member of the cabinet, first as a member of the standing committee before I was inducted into the cabinet. And I think that the standing committees in Parliament perform a very important oversight function. Myself, I've tried my best. I think over the past year, there's hardly a standing committee meeting that I've missed, both in terms of explaining the legislation we propose, but also answering questions related to, debt or economic performance, macroeconomic performance, tax issues, tax implementation issues, administrative issues. I think various issues have been raised by members and the chairperson of the standing committees, and we've always endeavored to make sure that we're there and we try to respond and to react. I think there are react in a positive sense, in the sense that if there is some guidance, some issue that gets raised in a standing committee, and that can enable us to correct course or improve things, we always take that guidance, and we continue to do that. It's the same in the National Assembly and the Senate. We have regular question hours. I myself have tried my best to always be there to answer the members' questions. I think it's one of the best things about Parliament, that various ministries' performances are addressed in public terms, in public language, in language that is common to the citizen, by members of the National Assembly who ask us to answer to them on various aspects related to the ministries and issues affecting the people. But more than that, I think one of the most important changes that has happened last year and will continue this year is that both the standing committees of the National Assembly and the Senate on Finance both have reviewed the budget. So Parliament has never scrutinized the budget more than it has done last summer, and that it will do this summer. Because in the past, it was only the standing committee of the Senate that would scrutinize the budget before the Senate would complete its recommendations and send to the National Assembly. But last year, this change was introduced where both the standing committee in the Senate, chaired by Senator Madiwala, and the standing committee in the National Assembly, chaired by Mr. They will both be again reviewing the budget. So it results in a lot more opportunity for scrutinizing, explaining, and justifying the budget. So you'll see this very robust, I think, engagement during the month of June. And I would really suggest, I've seen a lot of journalists, reporters, even, you know, talk show anchors, I see them popping in and out. So I would really suggest, I think it's one of the best places if you want to be able to understand the budget and really see us getting scrutinized and justifying our budgetary measures. I think that will be a great forum. So with that, I'm sorry, I've just taken up a lot of your time, but I'm grateful once again, Parth Saab, and to you and to Dr. Saab for the opportunity. Yeah, and I look forward to continuing engaging with you at other forums. Thank you.
So we are now, quick question because we are closing.
But I have just a very quick question. Despite all these consultative mechanisms that you are pointing to in the budget, how come we see such a raft of anti-people policies coming from the government?
So I don't know. I mean, anti-people is,
I'll give
again,
you
this is a
example.
discussion we can have on the sidelines to say what anti-people would be, but you know, specifically, it's one thing to, there are two things. Khurram Saab, I read your column regularly. And I think there are two things. One is there are issues that need to be addressed. Some are tax related, some are revenue related. I mean, for example, I think none of us, I wouldn't, and no one would deny that the tax burden on whether it's a Pakistani exporter or whether it's a Pakistani salaried individual is high. Our ability to address that at the pace that we want to remains constrained by fiscal realities, which you understand better than most people. So we want to try and improve that as much as possible. However, you know, we are constantly trying to improve things. I mean, we can have a long debate about FBR. Is FBR without any issues? Not at all. Has the government tried to really reform it, and has it made certain improvements? I believe so. The Prime Minister has been personally overseeing it, whether it's on the customs side, whether it's on the, you know, removing discretion of officers on the audit side. We can go into those details. But I can assure you that to the extent possible, you will be in the coming days also seeing some other things, including measures related to widening the tax net. I don't want to speak much about it at this stage because it's we'll bring the details later. But I've been very regularly and heavily engaged with a lot of retailers, retailer organizations to try and make sure that finally we can find a way to bring them into the net. And the best part is that the proposal has come from them after our consultations. So, Parth, with your permission, I think it's a discussion we can, you know, unless someone wants to discuss it, but we can take it up.
We can do it later.
And I can also show you just one thing. Immediately at 5 p.m. today at SIMC, I'm due to meet the presidents of all the chambers, of various chambers of commerce, FPP, FPCCI, Rawalpindi, Gujarat, Gujranwala, you know, and the purpose, again, this is on top of the budget consultations we've already carried out with them. And this particular meeting, just to give you an example, is not related to listen to the budget proposals we already obtained. This is related to their day-to-day issues that they face in various, whether it's customs, whether it's state bank. This is another regular feature that I've kept up throughout the year, so that we provide them a forum where the representatives of all the relevant ministries are available, and we can take up each issue and resolve it. So these are our efforts, but I understand various issues still remain. We try to resolve them one by one, and it's a discussion I'm happy to carry on with or offline or at another place.
Thank you so much, Bilal Kiani, Minister of State for Finance, for joining us. Thank you again for all our panelists for this very important discussion at a very challenging time. We are closing this seminar in the hope that good policy making will, even if it doesn't solve the problem that we're facing, at least it heads or directs policy in the right way. The budget is here, and of course, the budget will show us in many ways what the government is thinking, whether it has learned any lessons from the past. I would also like to thank Dr. Abis Lahiri and STPI for partnering with us for this event. We express 24/7 dialogue is a series that will continue to address key important issues relevant to Pakistan, so we can generate debate that can help both our audiences and policymakers to make more informed decisions. So thank you and goodbye.